So welcome to my walkthrough for the Edexcel Higher paper. It's the summer of 2018 papers we're starting today, and it's non-calc, which is why it starts off with the usual fractions work. So first question, going to make them top heavy, so I always go big times bottom, 2 sevens are 14. Add the 1 on top, 15 is your numerator. Denominators stay the same. Big times bottom, 1 times 4 is 4. Add the top, we get 5 over 4. Lowest common multiple, smallest number that 7 and 4 go into, is 28. On the left-hand side, we are multiplying by 4. On the right-hand side, we are multiplying by 7. And weirdly, the mark scheme has that as its answer. Strange doesn't say to leave it in mixed form or anything, to be fair, so it doesn't say, but just for good practice, more often than not, it does say simplest form, mixed fraction, and so on, as it does for part B. So I was a bit surprised for part A, but do it as good practice anyway. Part B, same again. Turn the first fraction into improper, top heavy, whatever you call it. But this is your old KFC. Keep, flip, change. You could do top times top straight away, but I always prefer, if there's any pre-cancelling to be done, do it. And we've got a 6 on top, 3 on the bottom. They both divide by 3, which gives us 2 4s are 8 on the top and 5 on the bottom. And this does tell us to leave it simplest form. That'll be mixed form then, so 1 and 3/5. Number 2, the old favourite, I say, in quote-unquote terms. Well, wordy ratio, so one thing at a time. In a village, houses, flats. 7 to 4. Flats and bungalows, 8 to 5. 50 bungalows. Get the information in. Realise it's times by 10 on the right, so same goes there. So if there's 50 bungalows, there's 80 flats. In other words, there's 80 flats. That's a times by 20. Do the same to the houses. And you're home. You've got it right. Number 3. So the old non-calc percentage profit. So don't forget the formula. You want actual profit divided by original amount multiplied by 100. And some of you will prefer to do it as 100 over 1. It's entirely your preference. So she's got a 5 kilogram bag of sweets. Let's change that into grams first of all. And 5,000 shared in, well, 250 goes into 1,000 4 times, so she can make 20 bags. Each bag is sold for 65 pence. 65 twos, 130, so that's 1,300 pence, or in other words, £13. Again, with the pre-cancelling, divide the bottom by 10 and the top by 10. Whoopsie doodle. As I said, actual profit, not amount she gets. I'm sure you spotted it. Top times top, bottom times bottom, and we get the answer 30. On we go. So number 4, good old estimate. So a cycle race across America is that distance. So mental notes, the old distance, speed, and time. And it wants how many days. So you could work in days. You could realise that 15 times 8, that's 120, and go from there. But for me, I'm going to go for time. equals distance. So that's 3,000 miles divided by 15 miles per hour. And 30 divided by 15 is 2. So we get 200 hours is our estimate. 8 hours a day. So you could halve it again. That would work to get 25 days. Or you could do a bus stop. So when they train for the race, the average speed increases. They get better. What does this affect? There's actually a couple of ways the mark scheme allows. The obvious answer is, well, if you ride faster, the answer to part A will reduce. But they do allow you the alternative get out that you would still round 16 to 15. So in actual fact, the knock-on effect would, if you argue that way, the knock-on effect would be that your answer won't change. But you've got to be clear in that you can't just put it will stay the same. You must state why. Question 5. My usual ace ability with technology means I've done it already because it takes too long. So the key mistake here is when you look at it from the front view, it's not the 5 centimeters you see. The pyramid will look 4 centimeters tall from top to bottom. And I'll stay on this page because you know what part B asks. Part B is asking for the surface area of the pyramid. I'll do the thinking here. Surface area doesn't take into account your perspective. It is literally the area of all the surfaces. So actually, when you do the surface area, you've got the base. That's the easy bit. That's the 6 times 6. But then you'll need 4 lots of the triangle. And the triangle's base is 6. But its height, it's not its vertical height in terms of that's not shared. The height of the pyramid is 4. The height of the triangle is 5. So when you do a half base times height on the actual triangle and not the pyramid, it results in the final answer of 96. And as you can see, one of those rare questions where the units are missing. Don't forget to stick in the centimeters squared. So where that come from, the base is 36 and the 4 triangles are a half times the base times their height times by the 4 of them, and that gives you the 60 to make the 96 in total. Number 6 is a weird question, but once you suss out that horizontally the x-coordinate is 6 and the x-coordinate here is 38, the widths of the squares is just 8 by 8 lengths and widths because it's 32 divided by the 4. So to get the horizontal positioning of C, you start at 6, go right 8, right 8, or in other words, 6 plus 16. You can't do that vertically because you can't just add on to 7 because C is not, it's below there. You've got to go the other way. You've got to start at 36, go down 8, go down 8. In other words, 36, take away 16 to give you the y-coordinate of 20. Number 7, yes, I've cheated. But one thing at a time with these questions. So shape T, the line x equals -1. So there's your vertical line going through -1 to give you shape R. That's then reflected y equals -2. That's a horizontal line, and that reflects down there to give us shape S. Describe the single transformation. Now you could have, by the way, enlargement, scale factor -1, around centre there because it's equidistant away. 2 to the right, 3 up, 2 to the left, 3 down. So the enlargement is a possibility, but I'd argue the more obvious one is that it's a rotation. Half a turn, in other words, 180 degrees around the centre of where those lines actually intersect, -1, -2. So a couple of potential right answers for that. Number 8. So it's a weird way of basically saying share 72 in the ratio of 3 to 4 to 5. That's your first idea. So that means there's 3 sides, but there's 12 shares. Each share's worth 6. So let's multiply each of these sides by 6 and 30. Now, because it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle, that's one of those known facts that it will be right angled. Okay, and the longest side, therefore, will be on the hypotenuse, and the other 2 sides will account for the base and the height, and that's the knowledge you need. So you don't actually need the 30 to work out the area. It's a half times the base times the height. So basically 9 times 24, 216 for that. Number 9, just some straightforward knowledge for A and B. So power of a half means square root it. 6 will be the most popular answer, but if you want to be watertight and perfect, plus and minus 6. For B, anything to the power of 0 is always 1, never changes, doesn't matter the number or a letter, it's always 1. And for part C, first job, I always acknowledge the minus power first by doing that, and then focus on the power of 2/3. I always used to tell my classes the top number makes it bigger, the bottom number makes it smaller, and without a calculator, you want to make it smaller first. So the cube root of 27 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. Number 10, yeah, I've also cheated because this is just too easy, let's be honest. All right, anyone, all right, doing the higher paper, I'm afraid you should be fine with this, particularly as there's no need to add or subtract. It is just literally stick the values on, and there you go. Work out an estimate for the number of girls between 133 and 157. Well, as you can see, that's the first 3 sections of your box plot, and each section accounts for 25%. So your job is to work out 75%, in other words, 3/4 of 80. Done. On we go to harder questions. Number 11. So it says give reasons. Now I have listed them out extensively on my worked answers, so go to the website to have a look at those. Here I just talk through them. So the first thing to notice is if you draw on, always look for isosceles triangles on these questions. AO is the radius, OB is the radius, you have an isosceles triangle, and while we're there, with OB being the radius, BC being a tangent, tangent and radius always meet at a perpendicular, at a right angle, so stick the 90 degrees in there. So now let's go through the logic. Find the size of angle ACB. So it wants this angle, and it tells us to call ABO, that's this, call that X. So, due to the isosceles triangle, base angles in an isosceles triangle are equal. So the angle OAB, that's also X. That means that the angle here, A to O to B, because angles in a triangle make 180, the angle on the left of this radius, AOB, is 180 minus 2x. And the knock-on effect, thanks to angles on a straight line being 180, means angle BOC is 2x. And we finish off with angles in a triangle yet again. All right, so the idea is that angle ACB is 180 minus the 90 at B minus the 2x at O. And you simplify, and that is the final answer. Number 12, prove. So don't forget, even numbers are always of the form 2n, 2n plus 2. That's a consecutive even. 2n plus 20 is another even number, but it's non-consecutive, and so on. So the square of an odd number. So the simplest odd number is 2n plus 1. You could have a 3, a 5, or whatever there. But let's square it and see what happens. So we get square the first, square the last, times the 2 together and double it. And look what you can do here. Take a 4 out. Anything times 4 will be a multiple of 4. And job done. It has to be a multiple of 4 plus 1. That's it. Number 13. So it's your choice whether you want to simplify it at the end and just do 5/8 and so on, 5/18s, or if you want to simplify it right at the start. Personally, I go for right at the start. It's non-calc, so keep the numbers as small as you can. So root 8 should be one that's familiar to you. I should root 18, really. 4 2s are 8, so that's 2 root 2. And the same thing with root 18. That's 9 2s, so that's 3 root 2. So we can actually simplify the brackets as being 5 root 2. And it's much easier to expand now as well. So there's no number there, so let's call it a 1. 1 times 5 is 5. Root 5 times root 2 is root 10. Find the value of A, the number in front. There we go. These are very, very popular. I think going through these papers, I've done these connected proportionality questions at least 4 or 5 times now. This must be at least number 5. So, as soon as you've got connected, I like to work on one then the other. So, Y is inverse proportion means over. And it goes on to the next bit. So let's carry on working down the left-hand side. When D is 10, Y is 4. Replace the Y with 4. Replace the D with 10. 10 squared. So as you can see, K is 400. So we've got our first equation. Now we can move on to phase 2. D is directly proportional. I'll use a different letter to x squared. D is 24 when x is 2. So that's C times 4 then. So as you can see, C is 6. So we've got this second equation. D is equal to 6x squared. Find a formula for Y in terms of x. Or to put it in another way, get rid of the D. So to get rid of the D, you need to replace this D with that. So 400 over, replace d with 6x squared. Don't forget there's a squared on the outside. So let's square these brackets. 6 squared, 36. X squared all squared is multiply the powers. And there we go. They are both in the 4 times table. It does say give your answer in its simplest form. The simplest form is 100 over 9x to the power of 4. Number 15, that's your old friend, the difference of 2 squares. That's why it's only worth 1 mark. A plus b, a minus b. And it says hence or otherwise. There is a quick way, smart aleck way, but when it says hence or otherwise, and you're revising at the moment, why not just practice your expanding? Because it is good word practice, because it's trickier with that negative. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it the normal, I'm going to do it the otherwise way. So x squared plus 4 all squared. So square the first, square the last, times them together and double it. I'm going to do the same technique here, but don't forget to multiply everything by -1. So square the first, square the last is plus 4. But don't forget, the minus comes into play. Times them together and double it is -4x squared. So that becomes positive 4x squared. And as we can see, the x to the 4's, they cancel out. So we've got 8x squared, 4x squared gives us 12x squared. And we've got 16 minus 4. It says simplify fully. I think that's a reasonably good answer, but let's just, again, always be watertight, just in case. Number 16. So I'd build this up. It is another wordy ratio question, but you have got ratio into probabilities. So there's only red, blue, and purple. Save a bit of room by squeezing in here, just in case we need more space. Ratio of red to blue is 3 to 17. Probability that it's purple is 0.2, or in other words, a fifth. So if they're in that ratio of 3 to 17, that means red is 3/20ths and blue 17/20ths. But they don't all add, as you know, you might go, oh, they don't add up to 1. They're separate. All right, that's just sort of thinking. Because that's a ratio of 1 to the other, not including that. So work out the probability that Sam takes a red counter. So we have to consider, first of all, the probability that it isn't purple. That'll be 4/5. So that's the thing that we must consider first. We don't want a purple. The chance of getting a purple is a fifth. So not a purple is 4/5. Once we've known and banked that, we then need the probability that it's red. And out of red and blue, it's 3/20ths. Again, I'd pre-cancel. Divide the top by 4. Divide the bottom by 4. What am I getting? 3 over 25. In other words, 0.12 if you want to go for decimals. Entirely your choice. Number 17, if you revise enough, you'll see umpteen of these. They always mean factorise, and a heck of a lot of stuff usually cancels, and if it doesn't, you've messed things up. On the bottom, always the best, I think, to factorise the easiest part of it, because I'm now looking for this bracket to simplify and be present on the top. So you do have clues. We know the 3 is a prime number, and the 3x bracket is not going to cancel, so it must be this bracket. So it has to be x minus 3. So of course it's good practice to be going down the route of trying the AC method. That's why they've given us plenty of room for this, to do the AC method. But if you just spot a little shortcut like that, we now need a number that multiplies to give -3. Well, that's just +1 then. And you're there. But yeah, do practice the AC method. You know it's going to come up. But also practice these nice little shortcuts. Keep an eye on what needs to happen in order for it to simplify. But we're left with 3x plus 1 on top and 2x on the bottom. I've cheated for 18 because no one wants to see a rubbish sine curve drawn by me and my electronic pen. Let's just explain that if you have a -2 on the end of any equation, it moves it down 2. Again, I always compare it to easier graphs that you'll be familiar with. Y equals x squared. You all know what that looks like. Stick a -2 on the end, it does that. If you stick a -2 in the middle of it, that's a horizontal translation. That moves it right 2. So you've got to learn the difference between a -2 on the end of an equation and a -2 inside a function. This one is on the end of an equation, so as you can see, I took the max and the min and the points of intersection with the axis, shifted them down 2, and did my best smooth curve I possibly can. On we go. Number 19. They've given you plenty of room to draw a diagram if you would like. Me personally, not for this one. So we'll come back to this. Let's just have a look over here. You've got a line. So it mentions perpendicular. It means it would be nice to know the gradient. So let's take away 3x from both sides and divide both sides by 2. So we know its intercept 7/2, but we're less interested in that. We've got the gradient, it's -3/2, a line perpendicular to PQ. So the gradient of the perpendicular, flip and change the sign, negative reciprocal, 2/3. We've now got enough information because this one is actually just hidden algebra. Why is that? Because you don't know A and B, but if you did, you would do a subtract. The definition of gradient is change in y's over change in x's. And the word change means difference. How do you find difference? You subtract. So b minus 4, that's the difference. A minus 3, that's the difference. And that's the formula for the gradient. I could put that equal to m. But why would I bother when I know what m is? So now we can cross multiply, times both sides by 3. Multiply both sides by a minus 3. It says find an expression for b in terms of a. It wants b equals to be the answer. So let's add 12 to both sides. And let's divide everything by 3. So we get 2/3 of a, and we get a +2 on the end. And that's as far as you can take that question without knowing any more information. Finally, number 20. So the first part, let's deal with the easy bit first. Let's solve that inequality. 3n must be less than or equal to 12. So n must be less than or equal to 4. So basically 4 and below, the integers 4 and under. Let's now move on to the slightly harder bit. Let's multiply both sides by n squared plus 5. Now, I'm never a fan of having the n squared on the right-hand side of an inequality. So I'm going to move them across. Basically, I'm going to mirror image the whole lot. N squared plus 5 is less than 6n. So I can now subtract 6n from both sides. Plus 5. And we can investigate by factorising. And we get the values minus 5 and minus 1 in the brackets. So our critical values here are n needs to be between 1 and 5. So that's the first constraint. I drew a number line on my worked answers. Here I'll just make a list. N needs to be under the axis. So if you wanted to draw it, there's your 1, there's your 5. You're wanting the region between. They're the integers, but n must be less than or equal to 4. All right, but because of this, although 1's a critical value, it cannot be equal to 1. Because of this constraint up here, it cannot be equal to 5, but it can be equal to 4, 3, and 2. So 1 has to be rejected. 5 has to be rejected. The answers are 2, 3, and 4. And there we go. Got to be honest, I always look at how long a video takes me to record. What was that, 32 minutes or so? That must mean it was quite a nice paper. All right. Not some big brutey ones. They come in on other papers, but that was quite a fair opener. There is some chunky ones to come. But I hope that helped. I'll see you on the next one.